Namasarvebhyah. In this video, we will learn about the usage of the two Sarvanama words Bhavat and Yushmad in Sanskrit language. When it comes to the usage of these two words, there is an unwritten convention observed amongst the Sanskrit speakers of today's society. People always prefer the word Bhavan or Bhavati, especially while talking to scholars, teachers, elderly people, and also while interacting with colleagues or unknown people. The word Tvam, on the other hand, is either completely avoided or it gets used in a very restricted scenario. For instance, while talking to kids, youngsters, juniors, subordinates, servants, and so on. Now, while there is nothing wrong with this convention, many students unknowingly associate this with a very basic misunderstanding. They either believe or they are taught to believe that the word Bhavan or Bhavati somehow conveys a sense of respect and it means something like your honor, your worship, sir, and so on. On the other hand, Tvam has a more friendly tone and therefore it fails to convey the required respect, and that's why one should always prefer Bhavan or Bhavati over Tvam. Well, if you have learned or taught something like this, then let me burst this bubble right away. The reality is that there is no difference whatsoever in the meanings of the words Bhavan or Bhavati and Tvam. It is perfectly okay to say Tvam Vada while talking to a scholar and you're not disrespecting that scholar at all. At the same time, it is equally perfect to use the word Bhavan while talking to friends, kids, subordinates, and so on. The bottom line is that you are free to choose whichever word you want, and you're also free to mix and match these words in your conversations. But how do we know this? Well, koshas are to the rescue. Shabdakalpadruma and Vachaspatyam are the two of the well-respected koshas in Sanskrit language, and both of them clearly say that Bhavat is used in the meaning of Yushmad. Yushmadartham. Neither of these koshas mention anything about having an additional layer of respect in the meaning of Bhavan. That is our certificate, that is our pramanam. But you might ask, what if the koshas are missing this minor detail? Is there an even bigger pramana than the koshas? Well, the prayogas in the language tell a lot in this context. We can give not just one or two, but hundreds of examples wherein we can see that these two words are used interchangeably in the literature. In Raghuvamsha, for instance, the words Tvam and Bhavan are seen used in a single shloka. Sattvam nivartasva vihaya lajjam guror bhavan darshita shishya bhaktihi. Here, lion is referring to King Dilipa by the words Tvam and Bhavan in the same sentence with the same meaning. Similarly, in Ramayanam, in the Kishkindha Kanda, Rama says to Sugriva, Twadadhina vayam sarve vanesmin sharanam bhavan. We are your dependents and you are our protector in this forest. Here also we can see the use of the words Yushmad and Bhavat in the same sentence. Not just this, but we can also see the word Bhavan used in the contexts when no respect is really intended. For example, in Naishadhiya Charitam, the bird insults the king for his greed, but while doing so, he uses the word Bhavan Manaha. In Abhijnana Shakuntalam, the king uses the word Bhavan while talking to his driver, Sarathi, Kim na pashyati bhavan? This is an example where the word bhavan is used while talking to a subordinate. In the same spirit, we can also see the word tvam used to indicate the feeling of respect and submission. For instance, once again in Ramayanam, Maharshi Valmiki says to Maharshi Narada, Maharshe tvam samarthosi jnatumevam vidham naram. Here, Valmiki is referring to the great sage Narada by the word tvam. Similarly, the use of the word tvam is very common when addressing gods and goddesses. Twameva mata cha pita twameva is a very well-known example. As another example, in Devi Saptashati, the gods pray to the goddess Mahalakshmi by saying, Ya mukti hetura vichintya mahavrata tvam. And these are again just a handful of examples. In fact, a great grammarian of the modern times, Professor Mahabaleshwar Bhatta, has written a book called Lekharatna Manjusha, in which he dedicates one full chapter to this topic. The name of the chapter is Sarvatra Bhavat Shabda Prayoge Nasti Anauchityam. In this book, Professor Bhatt gives more than 30 examples from different parts of the literature to demonstrate that the Yushmad and the Bhavat Sarvanama mean one and the same thing. At the end, he concludes by saying, ज्येष्ठेषु भवत्शब्दस्य प्रयोगः इतरेषु च युष्मत्शब्दस्य प्रयोगः इति विभागः आधुनिकानाम् एव न तु प्राचीनानाम्. Our traditional literature does not distinguish between the meanings of bhavat and yushmat. The difference that has become so popular today in the society has risen possibly because of the influence of regional languages, and it is in fact pretty modern. Coming to this topic of modern Sanskritam, Rashtriya Samskrita Samsthana has published a document called Sarala Manaka Sanskritam. In this document, they provide some suggestions for the beginners of Sanskrit language. In one of the topics, they recommend the use of bhavat over tvam in spoken Sanskritam purely for the ease of learning, but at the same time, they make it clear that the two words have been used in the same meaning in the literature. कालिदास प्रभृतिभिः महाकविभिः अपि युष्मत् शब्दस्य भवत् शब्दस्य च समाने अर्थे प्रयोगः कृतः दृश्यते. The poets and many other scholars have used the two words in the same meaning. There is another interesting point worth mentioning here. In Vag Vyavahara Darsha, Charudeva Shastri says that in lot of places in the literature, we see the phrase Tatra Bhavan used to indicate a name with some respect. Tatra Bhavan iti padasamudayaha pujyavachanaha. But then he also clarifies that this phrase is typically used not in the second person sense, but in the third person sense. For example, Tatra Bhavan Kalidasaha Meghadutasya Rachayita. Respected Kalidasa is the creator of Meghaduta. Here we are not talking to Kalidasa, but we are referring to Kalidasa with respect. Professor Shastri goes on to explain that in this case, it is the Tatra word that adds the additional meaning of respect to the word Bhavan. Tatra padasannidhane pujyarthabhidhanam. It should now be clear from this that the standalone word Bhavan, and that too when used as a second person pronoun to address somebody, does not necessarily convey any such meaning of respect. So then that brings us to a question. Is there any difference whatsoever between the words bhavat and yushmad? Well, the answer is that There are three major differences between these two words as pointed out by grammarians. First, the word bhavat is salinga. Merely the use of the word conveys the gender. For example, we say bhavan while talking to a man and bhavati while talking to a woman. On the other hand, the word tvam is a linga. Just by using the word tvam, it is not possible to understand whether you are talking to a man or a woman. Second, the word bhavan and of course the counterpart bhavati can be used in the sambodhana. For example, he bhavan or he bhavati. On the other hand, the Yushmat Sarvanama does not have a Sambodhana form. You cannot say He Tvam in Sanskrit. Finally, the word Bhavan, even though it is a second person pronoun, still it must use the Prathama Purusha forms of the Tinganta. For instance, Bhavan Gacchati or Bhavati Gacchati. Whereas the Yushmad Sarvanama must use the Madhyama Purusha forms of the Tinganta, for instance, Tvam Gacchasi. With this, I hope that there will be no more confusion between the words Bhavat and Yushmat in the minds of Sanskrit students. I personally recommend that the students start using both these words interchangeably in their sentences without really getting stuck in just one of the two, because that's the only way to improve the richness of our spoken language. Shubham Bhuya.